21 years. Can you believe that's how long the average person takes to pay off their student loans? 21 years. And, well, you're here listening to this because you know that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? We're going deep today, a deep dive into how student debt is hitting older Americans particularly hard. It's a side of this story we just don't hear enough about. So we've got this article, Business Insider. They profile a woman named Sue. She's, get this, 70 years old, staring down retirement, but she's still got this massive, like, $84,000 in student loan debt hanging over her head. It's tough. She's relying on Social Security, picking up odd jobs, anything just to kind of keep her head above water. And to make things even worse, remember that SAVE plan? The one that was supposed to be a lifeline for people exactly like Sue? Well, it's totally tied up in court right now, leaving millions of borrowers in this awful limbo.
Yeah, this whole SAVE plan situation, it really highlights how these policy changes can have such unexpected ripple effects. Nobody really saw this coming. So the plan, they call it Saving on a Valuable Education. That's what SAVE stands for, right? And it was designed with this goal in mind to make student loans, actually manageable, especially for people with lower incomes. The way it was supposed to work was like your monthly payments would be based on what you actually earn, how much you're making. And get this, there was this whole path to eventually like having those loans totally forgiven. It was a big deal. People were pinning their hopes on it, counting on it. And then, bam, this court order basically slammed the brakes on the whole thing. Everything's just frozen.
So let's break this down into plain English, for folks. What does this actually mean for someone like Sue in real world terms?
Okay, so for Sue, if the SAVE plan had gone through like it was supposed to, her monthly payments would have been like drastically different. She's paying something like $300 a month, right? With SAV, it would have been less than $50, night and day. But now she's just stuck, totally in limbo, wondering if she'll ever be free from this mountain of debt. And sadly, Sue's story, this isn't some isolated incident, right? There are millions of people going through the exact same thing. This legal battle, it's just created this massive wave of uncertainty. And it's hitting those on fixed incomes especially hard, the ones who are really banking on SEV for those lower payments and, that glimmer of hope that they might actually get some loan forgiveness.
I think sometimes it's easy for all of us to get lost in the legal mumbo-jumbo of it all. So just to clarify for everyone, a court injunction is basically just a fancy way of saying that the courts have stepped in, right? They've issued this legal order that basically puts the SAVE plan on hold for now. It's like, I don't know, hitting a speed bump just when you thought you were about to coast down the road to, some financial relief. And it's frustrating. Sue's story, it's so powerful because it really puts a human face on this whole issue, right? You can really feel it. But when you zoom out, when you look at the bigger picture, the numbers are even more, alarming, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. We're talking about, get this, $1.59 trillion, trillion with a T. That's the total student loan debt in the U.S. alone. And this is according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, not just some random statistic. Now, here's the thing that most people don't realize. We always think of student debt and, it's those recent grads, right? But the reality is it's the older generation that's actually seeing the biggest surge in debt. It's kind of wild, isn't it?
It's true. We've got this data from New America. They're saying that student loan debt among people nearing retirement, it's gone up by over 500%. And this is just in the past 2 decades. 500%. That's like, I don't even have words. You just don't expect older generations to be dealing with this level of student loan debt, do you? It's counterintuitive. It really is. I mean, it just doesn't seem right, does it? It's like you're supposed to be thinking about retirement, enjoying life, not drowning in student loan debt. So what's the deal here? What's driving this surge in student debt among, folks who are closer to retirement than they are to their college days?
Right. It is kind of a head scratcher at first. Well, there's a few things at play here. One big factor is that you've got more older adults these days going back to school, like way later in life. Think about it. They might be switching careers. Maybe they're finally pursuing a passion they've had on the back burner. Or maybe, and this is a big one, they're just trying to stay competitive in this crazy job market. It's changing so fast, you got to keep up.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Everything's changing so quickly, it's hard to keep your skills sharp, right?
Exactly. And so they're going back to school, maybe taking out new loans to pay for it, right? And that's on top of any debt they might already have. Oh, and here's another piece of the puzzle. A lot of older adults, they're still lugging around debt from their own education from like way back when.
Oh, wow. Yeah, those loans from decades ago. I hadn't even thought about that.
Right. And those loans, they might have started out small, manageable, but over time, well, that interest, it's like a snowball effect. It just keeps building and building.
So it's not always that they borrowed these massive amounts up front, but rather that time is kind of like magnified the debt they did have.
You got it. That's exactly it. And it just goes to show how this whole student loan system, especially with the way interest works, it can have these really, really long-term consequences. Consequences that can follow you for decades.
It's like you think you've moved on, you've built a life, a career, and then bam, those loans come back to bite you just when you thought you were in the clear.
And it's not just the loans themselves, right? It's the stress, the anxiety, the feeling of being weighed down, especially when you're trying to enjoy your later years, your retirement. It can cast a real shadow over things.
Absolutely. It's like this perfect storm, right? People are living longer, retirement savings are getting squeezed, everything's more expensive, and then you add this student loan debt into the mix. It's a recipe for, well, disaster for a lot of people.
I think you nailed it. It's this whole web of social and economic factors that have kind of created this pressure cooker situation for a lot of older Americans.
Yeah, it's a lot. So we've laid out the problem, right? Senior student debt is a real and growing issue, and the fact that the SAVE plan is in limbo. It's only made things worse, more stressful. But let's switch gears for a minute. Let's talk about what people can do, what options are out there. So the article mentioned this temporary pause on loan payments while the courts figure things out, right? That's got to be a bit of a mixed bag for borrowers, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's like a temporary reprieve, but with a catch. On the one hand, it gives borrowers some breathing room, right? Like if you're struggling to make those monthly payments, that pause can be huge. It's like a weight off your shoulders, at least for now. But, and this is the big but, while those payments are paused, no progress is being made toward loan forgiveness. So if you were on track for forgiveness under something like the Save EP plan, well, you're kind of just stuck in neutral until this whole thing gets sorted out.
It's a tough trade-off, right? Especially for people on fixed incomes, people who might not have a lot of time to wait for a resolution. It's like short-term relief, but long-term uncertainty. So what other options are there? The article also mentioned these buyback programs and like adjusting your repayment plan. Let's break those down, starting with buyback. What is that exactly?
Okay, so buyback, it sounds more complicated than it is. Basically, it lets borrowers make this lump sum payment towards their loans, and in exchange, they get all this retroactive credit. It's like making up for missed payments in the past, which can then like fast track their progress toward forgiveness. But here's the catch. It takes money, and often a lot of it, to do a buyback. It's a big upfront cost that, let's be honest, a lot of people, especially someone like Sue living on a tight budget, they just don't have that kind of cash lying around.
It's a classic catch-22, right?
Yeah.
You need money to potentially save money, but if you had that kind of money, you probably wouldn't be sweating those student loans in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about these alternative repayment plans then? How do those work?
So, switching to a different repayment plan, this can be a really smart move for some borrowers. Essentially, these plans, they let you adjust your monthly payments, usually lowering them to make things more manageable. But, and there's always a but, right? This often means you end up paying more in total interest over the life of the loan.
Right, it's like stretching out the debt over a longer period. You might get some relief now, but it'll cost you more in the long run. Talk about a tough decision.
It really is. It's a balancing act, and there's no easy answer. Every situation is different, which is why it's so important for people to really do their research, explore their options, maybe even talk to a financial advisor if they can.
It's kind of overwhelming, to be honest. It's like you're trying to navigate this complicated system, make these life-altering decisions, and you're not even sure if you're doing the right thing. It just highlights how we need solutions that are actually designed for older borrowers, solutions that take into account the unique challenges they face.
100%. And it's so important to remember that, like, not all older Americans with student loan debt are in the same boat, right? Their situations are all different. You've got people who are, like, on the cusp of retirement. They've got manageable debt. They're doing okay. But then you've got folks like Sue struggling to keep their heads above water. Every month is a tightrope walk. We need more nuance in the solutions, These one-size-fits-all programs, they just don't cut it.
It really makes you wonder, are there other ways to tackle this? Are there solutions out there that we're just not talking about? Solutions that could really make a difference for older borrowers specifically?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, what if, and this is just one idea, what if we had these retirement plans that were tied to your income? So your loan repayments would adjust based on how much you're actually making in retirement. That way you're not like choosing between making your loan payment or, putting food on the table. Or here's another thought. What about connecting debt forgiveness to community service? Like older Americans, they've got so much experience, so many skills to offer. What if they could use that to give back to their communities and at the same time chip away at their student loan debt. I'm not saying these are like the perfect solutions, but we've got to start thinking outside the box, you know?
I love that. It's like finding those back roads, those shortcuts through the maze. There are other ways to get where we just have to be open to exploring them.
Exactly. There's no magic bullet here, but we have to keep the conversation going. We need policymakers, we need financial institutions, everyone to step up and be willing to think differently, find solutions that really work for older Americans with student loan debt.
It's about more than just numbers on a spreadsheet, right? It's about people's lives. Well, we covered a lot of ground today, didn't we? We dug into those personal stories, those numbers that are just like mind-blowing. And we really got into the weeds on those potential solutions, the good, the bad, the ugly. I think the biggest takeaway here is that there's no easy fix. But awareness, understanding the problem, that's where it all starts. And who knows, maybe by shedding some light on this issue, by talking about it, by getting people thinking about it, we can start moving towards solutions that are actually fair and that actually work. So to everyone listening, don't let this be the end of the conversation. Keep asking questions, do your research, talk to people about this. Because at the end of the day, creating a student loan system that makes sense, that's fair, that's sustainable, it benefits all of us. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been real.
And until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and stay curious.